So thank you very much for inviting me to talk to you today about some of the water resources and some of the challenges that we're facing here in climate change. I find it a bit of an irony in a sort of a rainy fall afternoon in Seattle talking about challenges for water resources, but here we go. A quote that I've often seen here when we talk about climate change is that if mitigation is all about carbon, then adaptation is all about water. And I'm not sure if that's entirely true, but for those of us managing water, we think it's true. So it really is where you start to feel any kind of change in climate first is with your water resources, I think. In British Columbia, our challenges are probably a little bit different than from where a few of you folks are from. I mean, BC has got substantial resources, including water. We generally have a lot of water and a fairly sparse population. Despite that, we still do have some challenges with shortages during certain times of the year, and we also have some challenges on the high end. We're very reliant on hydroelectric. I think we're somewhere in the name of 95% hydroelectric resources in BC, so any change in the water resources affects our energy. We also have a significant flood risk in a lot of our cities, so any change in water resources really affects our flood potential. So we've been thinking about this whole climate change piece for some time and trying to think about what it is that we need to do different. So that's primarily what I want to talk to you today, but just about some of the changes that we're thinking that we might have to do here. Some of the obvious ones is infrastructure. You start asking yourself questions about some of your diking systems, some of your dams. These things were designed 50 or 100 years ago. Were they designed with climate change in mind? In most cases, the answer is no. So what do you need to do differently with these? Some very large diking systems, some very large dams. Are the spillways designed to handle that? Are the penstocks designed to handle that? What about the effects of population behind these diking systems? Agreements. Agreements is an interesting one for us, and when I started thinking about this, many of the agreements that we sign with a variety of people, organizations, countries, really have a water component to them. The classic one for us in British Columbia is the Columbia River Treaty with the United States. This treaty is 40, 50 years old. Was there a climate change lens on that treaty when it was first signed? I doubt it. So now, if there's some changes to the treaty, if there's some renewal to the treaty, renegotiation, whatever, we're going to have to start putting a little bit of this climate change lens on that. The International Joint Commission, this is related to the Boundary Water Treaty between Canada and the United States that was signed in 1909. In those days, climate change probably wasn't an issue at all. It certainly is for us today. So any new agreements related to the Boundary Water Treaty or Board of Control or all of these kind of orders, we're starting to think more about climate change and can we live up to those commitments that we're making. We're currently in negotiations with our neighbor to the east, Alberta, over a BC-Alberta water treaty related to some of the rivers across our border. And this is a modern treaty, and climate change is front and center to that treaty. So unlike some of the older ones. We're also in a number of negotiations with First Nations around the province of British Columbia. There's a number of older treaties in the rest of Canada, but BC really lacks some of those treaties. Water is a huge component of the treaties. So we're really trying to write those treaties with climate change in mind, so that we can live up to our commitments. Legislative framework. We in British Columbia, we're very similar to the rest of Western North America. We run a first in right, first in time water allocation system. The Water Act was signed in 1909. Again, it's one of those older acts. We're currently modernizing the act, and I think we'll come out the other end with a new, more robust, more flexible water allocation system. But it begs the question: what do we do with the 44,000 water licenses that we've already issued under the previous act? Is there any changes to those or not? And we really haven't worked our way through this. I find it kind of interesting that our Water Act was signed in 1909. The Boundary Water Treaty with the United States was signed in 1909. And I think it was the formation of the Montreal Canadiens hockey team in 1909. So 1909 was a big year for us in Canada. The other thing that we are starting to do a little bit different here is looking at some of our forecasting tools. I'm an engineer, so models and forecasts are everything to us. Many of these we've been running for a number of years, but we don't really have any climate change built into them at all. And some of our tools are not running as good as they were before. So we're starting to see some changes here, and we really haven't adapted too much climate change into them. So we're struggling and trying to listen to the climate scientists and build those recommendations into our tools. And to date, we probably haven't had that much success. It's very difficult getting the science into the engineering, I'm finding. One of the places where we've had a fair bit of success, and just in the last year or so, is we've worked a lot with Washington State because we share a problem with sea level rise. So we've been collaborating as best we can, and we're getting a picture of what sea level rise might mean to us and looking out into the future what we might have to adapt for. So building the science into the tools and the engineering is probably the first challenge. So maybe this is this slide about the how do we do this. So as I mentioned, we're trying to adapt our tools. That's the first piece. Try to build the science into the models. The second piece, I think, is to build some flexibility into both the legislation, the agreements, the infrastructure, any of that type of stuff. We're not quite sure exactly where we're going with some of this climate change, but if you can build a little flexibility into the systems, I think that takes you a long way there. The other part is it's kind of, nothing lasts forever. No infrastructure lasts forever. Probably no agreement lasts forever. So these things are constantly being renewed, renegotiated, all that kind of stuff. If you know what the climate change pieces are that you have to build into the new ones, it's pretty easy to adapt. I think of this a lot of, we have a significant earthquake problem in British Columbia as well. If you went back 20 or 30 years, we never really designed many systems to handle large earthquakes. We've kind of got our mind around that, and now as we renew structures and infrastructure, we're taking that into account. I think a lot of the climate change pieces related to water resources are the same. Once you get your mind around it, whenever you build a new building, a new dike, a new dam, you just build it into the new facility. Always leaves you with the problem, what do you do with the existing ones? But over time, they're replaced as well. One piece I don't think we've done very well is with the public education. There's a lot of debate about climate change right now, and to some degree, our adaptation is trying to stay out of that debate, and we're just trying to listen as best we can to the science and then try to get people to adapt to it as best we can. We're seeing this on the flood hazard side of the business, and I think the public is starting to uptake that. Some of the other ones I think are more of a struggle. But if you're a farmer or if you live behind a dike, I think people are starting to see some of these challenges, and they're seeing sea level rise. They're seeing longer droughts. They're looking for some advice, I think, as to what to do differently now. And I think government has not done a terribly good job about that in the past, and I think it's something we need to step up to the plate on. So, thank you.